Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the next video in my series of March of the Machine Commander deck techs. I'm covering every legendary creature from the March of the Machine main set in no particular order, plus the extra legends from Mom Jumpstart, the special pre-release promos, and if there's interest, maybe the non-face legends from the Mom Commander product. So if you have a request for a March of the Machine Commander you'd like to see me build, or a way you want to see me build them, let me know in the comments below. As you see, today our commander is Zurgo and Ojutai, respectively the once and current Khan of the Mardu Horde, and the Dragon Lord who claimed the Jeskai for himself after Khanfall. This seems like a strange combination of characters, but Zurgo's viciousness parallels Ojutai's ruthlessness, and even though Ojutai seems like the wiser of the two, it was Zurgo who proposed their alliance during the Phyrexian invasion. Even in the present timeline with dragons ruling Tarkir, then Zurgo Bellringer recognized that dragons and non-dragons would have to fight together to repel the invaders, and Ojutai heeded his reasoning. This partnership set a precedent, and the cooperation that followed struck a blow against Phyrexia. I'm excited to show you what I put together for this duo, but before we get started, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander. There's a reason I put them in the command zone, and I want to show off how cool they are. So whatever they want me to do, I put 30 cards toward doing. That's my game plan. It's what we try to do at the table, and how we try to win. 30 more cards go towards supporting that game plan in the form of these three categories: card advantage, acceleration, and interaction. I usually run one or two Wraths, sometimes more if it would play into my game plan, sometimes none at all, but I almost always keep to my floor of 38 lands so I can make sure I hit my land drops and I can cast my spells and play the game. So let's talk about our team up commander. Zurgo and Ojutai is a 4/4 legendary Orc Dragon, for 2 and Jeskai mana, 2, a blue, a red, and a white. Zurgo and Ojutai has flying and haste, it has hexproof as long as it entered this turn, and it has, whenever one or more dragons we control deal combat damage to a player or a battle, we look at the top 3 cards of our library, put one in our hand, put the rest in the bottom in any order, and then we may return one of those dragons to its owner's hand. So interestingly, this effect, looking at the top 3, putting one in our hand and the rest in the bottom in any order, is Anticipate, a great spell that gives us both card advantage and card selection. Normally costs 2 mana, and of course this is the Dragons of Tarkir printing, but with Zurgo and Ojutai, we get it anytime dragons hit one of our opponents or a battle. So I think this is a really cool card. There are plenty of ways to build this deck, and I considered several of them, like Jeskai Dragons or a Spellslinger strategy. But what got me most excited was how Zurgo and Ojutai essentially has Dash, the Fate Reforged mechanic that allows creatures to enter with haste and then bounce to their opponent's hand at the end step. Combined with a Voltron shell, this turned into such a fun play pattern that it's where I landed. I'll explain. Zurgo and Ojutai have several things going on, but their minimum is a hasty, evasive flyer that protects itself the turn it comes in and anticipates when it hits. Then it can protect itself further by bouncing to our hand. It isn't on the battlefield to guard us in between turns, but it wasn't going to block anyway since we attacked with it. If we wanted, we could do this over and over, replaying our commander each turn to strike from the sky, draw us a card, and then hide itself back in our hand. It does mean we'd be spending 5 mana each turn to keep replaying it, but short of counter spells when we cast it and hand attack once we've bounced it, against opponents with no flyers and reachers, it's a free extra card in our hand every turn, plus guaranteed commander damage. Commander damage. Little too slow. Our commander has haste, has dash essentially. We can go faster. My original thought was to solve this with spellslinging. It felt very Jeskai to attack each turn with a commander whose stats are enhanced by the instants and sorceries I'm playing, then to let its Anticipate trigger refill my hand. But it also felt like a trap, the same way that a lot of single target interaction can feel less powerful in commander than in one-on-one Magic because you have more opponents. So I tried leaning a little more Mardu. I thought to use equipment that I could re-equip each turn, but adding an equip costs on top of the 5 mana per turn we're spending on our commander felt less like Dash and more like we were paying for Echo. It added up. So I looked to my favorite card type, enchantments, and then it just clicked. We have a handful of backgrounds from Baldur's Gate, giving our commander abilities whenever they're in play. We have other non-aura enchantments that give bonuses to all of our attackers, or grant double strike to multiply our damage and our Anticipate triggers. I did use a few equipment that either snap on for free when our commander enters, or equip for a pittance compared to what they give us. And we have Sources of Exalted to inch our commander damage over the finish line. Since we're casting our commander each turn, we have ways to get value from them entering the battlefield over and over. Since we're casting spells in addition to our commander, we have ways to get value from double spelling, making tokens, copying our effects, discounting our second spell, and even giving us more cards to play. Since we're always putting another card in hand from Anticipate, we have a low mana curve and a lot of ramp to make sure we can get those extra spells onto the stack. Meanwhile, our enchantments protect us by slowing attacks and redirecting opponents' threats or burning them out altogether. Our strategy doesn't change, but our turns play differently every time, our move set evolving with each peak at the top of our library. We watch like Zurgo as the battlefield develops, and plan like Ojutai as we chart the ways through it. We are stronger and more decisive than Kolagon, more quick and with more foresight than Narset. Our opponents call us button mashers as we any percent them, breaking sequences, shortening splits, spamming our special move, until their hopes are dashed too. You'll enjoy this deck if you love having a commander that's hard to interact with and quick to get their feet underneath them, or if you like the feeling of crashing an invincible dragon into your opponents and pretending their dismay is just them joining you in a war cry. So, as usual, this Moxfield list is linked in the video's description. At the bottom of it, you will see a considering section, a bunch of cards that I considered putting in the deck and ultimately decided not to, but they're still very effective if you maybe have a different budget than I do, something that's more expansive or even less, even though this is a relatively low cost deck for the power level I build at. Or if you want to focus in a specific direction that I didn't, the considering section is a good place to get you started. So we're going to begin with the most important part of our game plan, which is our Voltron strategy. Ways to pump up our commander so that we can win with commander damage. We're going to start with Civic Saber. A single generic mana gives us an equipment that equips for 1, and it gives equipped creature +1/+0 for each of its colors. Pretty cheap. A single generic mana once this is on the battlefield when our commander enters before combat to give them +3/+0 because they have 3 colors in their color, that they are 3 colors. Next, we have Doc Ock's Tentacles from the recent Spider-Man set. A single generic mana for an equipment that does equip for 5, but whenever a creature we control with mana value 5 or greater enters, we may attach this equipment to it. That means every time Zurgo and Ojutai enters the battlefield, we can have Doc Ock's Tentacles go ahead and snap right onto them for free. We never have to pay this equip cost unless we're putting it on, one of our other creatures. And it gives the equipped creature +4/+4, making our 4/4 commander, which would normally take 6 hits to kill a single person with commander damage, into an 8/8 commander, which only takes 3. We can even do better than that, though. We have Dragonfire Blade, a single generic mana for an equipment that equips for 4, but that equip cost is 1 less for each color of the creature it targets. So, much the way that Civic Saber does more damage, if the creature it's equipped to is more colors, Dragonfire Blade costs less to equip. So this means Dragonfire Blade costs us 1, and to equip to our commander, it only costs 1 more. And it gives equipped creature +2/+2, hexproof, hexproof from monocolored. Hexproof from monocolored, not that strong on our commander, since our commander is usually going to be on the battlefield for just 1 turn before we bounce them to our hand, and during that turn, since it's the turn that they came in, they have hexproof in general. But we can put Dragonfire Blade on something else. Maybe our commander, we decide not to bounce the first time because we need to keep them around for something, and hexproof monocolored gives a lot of good protective abilities. We can't be lightning bolted. We couldn't be Path to Exiled. We couldn't be Doombladed, any of these. And then if it sits around on the battlefield, it's just 1 mana to equip to give +2/+2. Next, we have Sigh of the Shinobi. This is from originally Plane Chase 2012? Interesting. A single generic mana for an equipment that equips for 2 and gives equipped creature +1/+1. Not a great rate, but whenever a creature we control enters, we may attach this equipment to it. It doesn't even have to have a certain power or mana value, like Doc Ock's Tentacles. Any of our creatures can get the Sigh on it, which means it's going to go on our commander every time we play our commander for just 1 mana. It's sort of like a persistent counter, if you want to think of it that way. Seems good. Next, we have Boros Charm. Boros Charm lets us play to our Voltron strategy in a couple of ways. For a red and a white, we get an instant that lets us choose one. We can either deal 4 damage to a player or planeswalker, we can give all of our permanents indestructible until end of turn, or we can give a target creature double strike until end of turn. This is the best Voltron-y thing we can do. Now, indestructible is not bad. Sometimes our opponents are going to play an instant speed Wrath and try and get rid of our commander that way. But being able to do our damage twice, like I mentioned in the heart of the deck, not only gives us twice as much damage, but the anticipate trigger is going to happen both times. We just choose not to bounce our commander to our hand at the end of the first one, and then the second one we'll get to anticipate again, and we'll bounce our commander at the end of that. So pretty nice. Next we have Brotherhood Regalia, which is, it's funny, almost 1/10 of the price of the deck at time of recording, but it's worth it. For 2 generic mana, we get an equipment that equips for 3, but equips to a legendary creature for 1. So very similar to some of our other equipment we've seen. It gives that equipped creature ward for 2 generic mana. It makes them an assassin in addition to their other types, and it means that they can't be blocked. This is why we have it here. Ward 2 is very good. We can put that on anything else, and it's protected a little bit better. But of course, our commander has ward the turn they came in. Has hexproof the turn they came in, so ward doesn't help that much more. Unless, of course, our opponent might be running a detection tower, so they can get through the hexproof, and now we've got the ward as well. But most importantly, it means that our flying commander can't be blocked even by other flyers or by reachers or anything. And in a deck that wants to win with commander damage, this is invaluable. Next, we have one of our backgrounds. Guild Artisan is 1 and a red for a legendary enchantment background. It says, commander creatures you own have, whenever this creature attacks a player, if no opponent has more life than that player, you create 2 treasure tokens. So this is an ability that our commander gains as long as it and our artisan are on the battlefield, our Guild Artisan background. It means once our commander attacks a player, as long as no opponent has more life than that player, we make 2 tokens. So as long as we're attacking an opponent that either has the most life among our opponents or is tied for the most life among our opponents, we get to make 2 treasure tokens. Now, we might not want to get this trigger if we're very close to killing with commander damage one of our other opponents that does not happen to have the most life or is not tied for the most life. Sometimes it's worth getting rid of an opponent instead of getting 2 treasure tokens. But earlier in the game, if we're able to get this going, these treasure tokens are going to do us a lot of good. Especially because our play pattern tends to be, we spend the first 3 or 4 turns building up toward our commander, either ramping with our mana rocks or playing things out like Guild Artisan or our equipment so that we can put them onto our commander as soon as they come out, since they can attack with haste. So this is a great way to ensure that we have ramped, or we're getting some ramp value the moment Zurgo and Ojutai comes in. Next we have Hero's Blade. 2 generic mana for an equipment that equips for 4, but it says whenever a legendary creature we control enters, we may attach this equipment to it. So it's another snap-on equipment, but only for legendary creatures. But our commander's legendary, so we might as well give them this +3/+2 every time they come in. Next, we're running Lizard Blades. Lizard Blades is 1 and a red for a 1/1 artifact creature equipment lizard with double strike. It is a reconfigure creature. Reconfigure is a special ability on a creature that lets you attach it to another creature. Essentially, this is an equipment and a creature. In the same way that if you bestow something onto or in a similar way, I should say, if you bestow a creature onto another creature, it's just an aura at that time. With Lizard Blades in play, we can pay 2 to reconfigure it, which means attach it to a creature we control, and then during that time, the Lizard Blades is no longer a creature, it's just an equipment, and it gives the equipped creature double strike. Then if we want, we can pay, also at sorcery speed, to reconfigure it off of that creature. Rather than like an equipment, we would have to move it to a different creature. We can just take it off, and when it falls off, it becomes a creature again. It just is a creature again. And of course, if heaven forbid, we put this on our commander and our commander dies, lizard blades will fall off, and it's just a little 1/1 double striking lizard, waiting for our commander to come back. Pretty nice. Now it does cost 2 to reconfigure it, so it's like equipping for 2, which is a little more than we would like to pay, but worth it to get double strike, especially because, again, we double up on our anticipates rather than just our damage. Next is another background. This is Noble Heritage. 1 and a white gives us a legendary enchantment background that says commander creatures you own have, when this creature enters and at the beginning of your upkeep, each player may put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature they control. For each opponent who does, you gain protection from that player until your next turn. Protection from a player means we can't be targeted, dealt damage, or enchanted by anything controlled by that player. We can't. Our things can. All of our permanents can be. Our spells on the stack can be, but not us. So we could be attacked, but we won't take any damage from those attackers. We can't be dealt damage either from those attackers or by anything that they try to throw at us, or anything that would do like 4 damage to each opponent. We won't be taking damage from that. We also, of course, can't be targeted, and we can't be enchanted, perhaps by like a curse. In any case, what's nice about this is it triggers when the commander enters and at the beginning of our upkeep. So our commander is generally not going to be in play at the beginning of any of our upkeeps, because we're going to bounce it to our hand once it does damage every turn. But it does trigger when it enters. So when our commander comes in, we're going to be able to put 2 +1/+1 counters on it, making it a 6/6, and then any of our opponents who wants to do the same thing, they're going to have to decide essentially not to mess with us until our next turn, which seems pretty good to me. Encourage people to send their damage and an enhanced amount of damage at our opponents, just whittles our opponent's life totals down too. Next is another background. It's Popular Entertainer. 1 and a red for a legendary enchantment background that gives all of our commander creatures, our commander, whenever 1 or more creatures we control deals combat damage to a player, go to target creature that player controls. So, pretty good. Goad, if you don't know of it, means that until our next turn, that creature has to attack if it's able to, and has to attack some other player besides us if able to. So pretty good. It means that their damage has to go at a player. It can't come at us unless we're the only player left. And if they can't avoid attacking by maybe, tapping that creature for mana if it has that ability, or otherwise making it unable to attack, then it's forced to attack. So this could be us saying, well, we only have 2 opponents left. One opponent has a 6/6 and one has a 5/5. If we go to that 5/5, probably the other opponent controlling the 6/6 is going to just block and eat the 5/5. So this is a slower version of us just removing that 5/5. Pretty good. In any case, it will protect us, because even if we were to goad the 6/6 by attacking that player, we're going to be able to ensure that the 6/6 is not attacking us and is attacking, so is tapped next turn, assuming it doesn't have vigilance, so we can get past it. So a little bit of evasion, a little bit of protection for us. Goading is really fun in Commander, and for just 2 mana and throwing this onto the combat damage trigger for our commander, that seems good. Next is Storm Rider Rig from Dragons of Tarkir. 2 generic mana for an equipment that equips for 2. It gives the equipped creature +1/+1, but as we've seen before, whenever a creature we control enters, we may attach this equipment to it. This is the same as Sigh of the Shinobi, except that it costs 1 more to cast initially. Otherwise, identical cards. So having these both out, pretty great. Just being able to see our commander come in, both of them trigger and then equip to our commander. Maybe Hero's Blade is out, so it sees a legendary creature come in, we equip that as well. Just build up an awful lot of power and toughness on our commander, and that gets our opponents closer and closer to death. Next we have another background. This is 1 and a blue for Sword Coast Sailor, legendary enchantment background, that gives our commander, whenever this creature attacks a player, if no opponent has more life than that player, this creature can't be blocked this turn. So giving us unblockable as long as we're attacking one of our opponents that has the most life among our opponents or is tied for it. Pretty sweet. It doesn't really help us do more damage, but it guarantees the damage we're doing, and we have so many other things to increase our damage. Zurgo Sailor is, again, a really smart, really sweet effect for us. Next we have Ardent Plea. I'm excited about this card. 1 a white and a blue for an enchantment that has Exalted, which means whenever one of our creatures attacks alone, which is usually how our commander's attacking, that creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each instance of Exalted among all of our permanents. So if Ardent Plea is the only version we have, well then our commander is going to get +1/+1 when it attacks by itself. If we somehow had 3 copies of Ardent Plea, each instance of Exalted would trigger, and our commander would end up with +3/+3. In addition, Ardent Plea has Cascade, which means when we cast it, we exile the top card of our library, and we keep doing that until we find a non-land card that costs less than 3. We can then cast it for free, and all the exiled cards go on the bottom of our library in a random order. So in all likelihood, Ardent Plea is going to find us something like Boros Charm, or maybe our Stormrider Rig, or any of these other enchantments or equipment that can help our commander out. Keeping our commander big and making them bigger some other way by cascading into something good. I like it. Next, one of our best backgrounds is Candlekeep Sage. 2 and a blue for a legendary enchantment background that gives our commander, when it enters or leaves the battlefield, draw a card. So as long as this is in play, if we're getting to do what we're trying to do with our commander, dash them in and bounce them to our hand, we're drawing 2 extra cards each turn, when it enters and when it leaves. Pretty great. Duelist's Heritage, another really good for 3 mana enchantment. This is 2 and a white that says whenever 1 or more creatures attack, you may have target attacking creature gain double strike until end of turn. Like you may have already seen, we have a few instances of double strike, ways that we can ensure our commander can hit twice and anticipate twice. And so we have a little bit of redundancy when it comes to that. But Duelist Heritage is a specifically interesting one, because it doesn't say whenever 1 or more creatures you control attack. It's just 1 or more creatures attack. So Duelist Heritage triggers on everyone's turn. Anytime someone attacks, we get to choose to have an attacking creature gain double strike until end of turn if we want. So we can use this politically. If opponent A decides to attack, we can say, all right, I know you're going to attacks. You could come at me, but if you go at opponent B, I can give one of your creatures double strike with Duelist's Heritage. That's public information. It's not like we're telling them something they wouldn't know anyway. And we don't have to make a deal with it. We could just wait until they attack. And once they've attacked, we could say, oh yeah, I'm also going to give that double strike. But being able to use it to maybe make a deal and say, you know, if I give your creature double strike when you attack, will you ignore me for a turn? You know, not bother me or come at me or stop my things? Usually that's worth it. You know, that's a nice bonus double strike and worth them focusing on someone other than us, especially since they're already attacking someone else or considering it. What's especially nice as well is the fact that if they say yes, then they're going to attack that player, which means their creature is probably tapped down, which leaves them open to us. Next up, we have another background. It's Flaming Fist. Much like Duelist Heritage, this gives double strike. 2 and a white for a legendary enchantment background. It gives our commander the ability, whenever the commander attacks, it gets double strike until end of turn. So it only works on our commander, but that's the only thing we want it to work on. Again, just a little bit of redundancy for us, gets us where we need to go. Grafted War Gear is next. I'm really pleased with this one in this deck. For 3 generic mana, so a little expensive for our equipment, but worth it, we get an equipment that equips for 0. We don't have to pay anything to equip it to a creature we control, and it gives +3/+2. However, when it becomes unattached from a permanent, we sacrifice that permanent. This is relevant to us on any of our creatures except our commander, with maybe 1 or 2 other exceptions. The reason this is important to see here is that this is a triggered ability that goes on the stack when it becomes unattached from a permanent. So at the end of turn, if we've attacked with Zurgo and Ojutai, who are equipped with the Grafted War Gear, not end of turn, but at the end of their Anticipate trigger, we can then bounce them to our hand. They've gone back to our hand, which means Grafted War Gear will become unattached, and then this ability will trigger. And we can say, oh, we have to sacrifice the permanent that this became unattached to. But Zurgo and Ojutai has changed zones. It's not a permanent anymore because it's in our hand now. We can't sacrifice something that isn't a permanent, so this does nothing. This just says if we unattach it from, maybe we've attached it to a token that we've made, because we've got plenty of tokens. If we then equip it to Zurgo and Ojutai from that token, well, we'll get this trigger and the token will be sacrificed. No big deal. We don't mind getting rid of that token if it gets us the Grafted War Gear on our commander. And we can equip this to our commander for free, once it's in play, every single turn with essentially no downside. Because even if our opponents somehow find a way to kill our commander, or exile our commander or something like that before the Grafted War Gear is unattached, that's still going to make our commander leave the battlefield, so Grafted War Gear still won't do anything to it. Pretty good. Nettle Cyst is... I enjoy this in a lot of different, unnatural decks, but it really performs highly in this one. 3 generic mana for an equipment that equips for 2 that says equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact and or enchantment you control. We've got a lot of enchantments. We're running 21 of them. We've got 24 artifacts, including the Nettle Cyst. So that's 43 other cards in the deck besides the Nettle Cyst that are going to give +1/+1, and it doesn't. It counts itself. So 44 cards in our deck to give +1/+1 to whatever we've got this equipped to, which will be our commander. Equipping for 2 to get +4, +8, plus even more to our commander every time they come in and attack, or right before they attack. That seems great. In addition, Nettle Cyst has Living Weapon, which means when it enters, we make a 0/0 black Phyrexian Germ creature token, and then attach the Nettle Cyst to it. So we get a 0/0 little friend, and attach the Nettle Cyst to it, which means if we have no artifacts, no enchantments, nothing else other than Nettle Cyst in play, our little germ is going to become a 1/1, because it'll get +1/+1 from the Nettle Cyst itself, since that is an artifact. And it's just going to grow bigger and bigger as we play more backgrounds, more equipment, all of our artifacts and enchantments. And it will hold that Nettle Cyst for us until we can get our commander out, and then once we equip the Nettle Cyst to our commander, assuming we haven't put anything else on the germ will die, because it's just a 0/0 and it's lost all of its bonuses. But it did its job of holding our equipment for us for as long as we needed it to, and now our commander is able to swing in and be a big thing. One more instance of Double Strike for us. This is Blood Mist. 3 in a red for an enchantment that says at the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gains Double Strike until end of turn. Just only hits our creatures, only happens on our combat. It's not quite as good as Duelist's Heritage in that way, but it's one more redundant way for us to do this. I will mention though, this is a 4 mana card, which our commander is 5 mana, but we don't have a lot of cards that cost more than 3 in this deck, just because we want to keep our costs down since we're paying 5 every turn to play our commander over and over. But Blood Mist is, again, another instance of Double Strike for us. It ensures that we're going to be able to do more damage and maybe even protect our commander if our opponents have a reach or flying blocker. We hit with first strike damage, at least. We don't get our anticipate trigger, but we're able to at least clear the way for them next turn. Worth having an extra instance of Double Strike for that, just so we can be more likely to draw it and thereby do that double damage when we're able to. Last here, I'm really excited about this card from the Lord of the Rings, Commander product, but I feel like it's probably from one of the scene boxes. In any case, if you know Tolkien, tell me if I'm pronouncing this correct in the comments, because this is Ramus Ekor, Ancient Shield. For 3 and a white, we have a legendary artifact with 2 abilities. It says whenever we cast our second spell each turn, we draw a card and then make an 0/3 white wall creature token with Defender. So this is one of the several cards we have that cares about us casting a second spell each turn. We'll see more of those in a moment. But when we do, we're going to replace that spell in our hand and then make a 0/3 wall with Defender. That's nice. We get little walls that can block for us. We get to have an extra card in hand. Remember, a lot of the time, our second spell is our commander. So getting to replace our commander in our hand is not really what's happening, since our commander is going to go back to our hand at the end of that anticipate trigger anyway. So we're sort of replacing the first spell we cast. However, in addition, at the beginning of combat on our turn, creatures we control with Defender gain Exalted until end of turn. So it's another instance of Exalted beyond just Ardent Plea. So each of our little 0/3 walls is going to trigger when our commander attacks alone, or when any of our creatures attack alone, but particularly our commander is what we care about. And each of those triggers is going to give a +1/+1 bonus until end of turn to our commander. So if this has happened, we've played this as our first spell on one turn, we cast another spell, we get a wall. 2 turns later, if we followed that same pattern, we've got 3 little walls, which means when our commander attacks alone, they're going to get +1/+1 from each of them. So that our 4/4 becomes a 7/7, and that only takes 3 hits to kill one of our opponents. Pretty good. So that covers our Voltron section. Let's take a look at more of our second spell cards. We've got 12 of them. So we're going to start with Brimstone Roundup from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. 1 and a red for an enchantment that says whenever you cast your second spell each turn, make a 1/1 mercenary. So this is a red creature with the ability tap, target creature you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn, activate only as a sorcery. So these are little 1/1 tokens that can chump block for us. They're really not going to do much damage on their own, but as a sorcery we can tap them to give our commander +1/+0 until end of turn. And this can just build up for us as we get more and more little mercenaries. Now these aren't as good as the walls that Ramas Ekor makes for us, but being able to say, I've just got all these 5 little mercenaries here, I'm going to make my commander into a 9/4 at the very least, and attack with that, maybe that gets us over the hump, and we're able to take out an opponent with that. In addition, Brimstone Roundup has Plot for 2 and a red, which means as a sorcery, we can pay 2 and a red and exile Brimstone Roundup face up. And then on a later turn, at sorcery speed, we can cast it for free. We don't have to pay its mana cost at that time. So that means Brimstone Roundup, if we are able to plot it, can be one of the 2 spells we cast in a turn. And if it's the first one, it resolves, hits the battlefield, we cast anything else, since we have all of our mana open, since we played this for free thanks to Plot, and then it will trigger since we're casting our second spell. Pretty good. I do want to make mention right now, just in case you are not familiar with the second spell type trigger, it won't trigger every other spell. It's not like it triggers on our second spell and then our 4th spell. It's just each turn, did we cast 1 spell already? Then this is the second spell and we're done. Did we already cast our second spell? Well, we're not going to get any more triggers from Brimstone Roundup. Next we have Clarion Spirit. 1 and a white for a 2/2 spirit from Kaldheim that says whenever you cast your second spell each turn, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. So these are 1/1 flyers, which is very nice, having a little bit of evasion and a little bit of ability to block flyers. They don't do what our mercenaries do in terms of pumping up our commander, but having flying, probably even better. Sometimes, though, the mercenary tokens are going to be better for us as well. So it's nice to be able to have the option or the ability to make both of these kinds of tokens. Next we have Monk class. I love this card. White and a blue for a class enchantment, which means it comes in with its first ability, which is the second spell you cast each turn costs 1 generic mana less to cast. Pretty good. Then at sorcery speed, we can level it up by paying a white and a blue to make it level 2. And once it's level 2, we can pay 1 a white and a blue to level it up to level 3. Every time we level it up, it won't lose the previous ability, it just gains another one. So once it's level 2, it has the second spell we cast each turn costs 1 generic mana less to cast, and whenever it becomes level 2, we trigger it and we get to return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So it's a little bit of a removal spell, we get to bounce something. And then finally, at level 3, at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library, and for as long as it remains exiled, you may cast this card from exile as long as you've cast another spell this turn. So this gives us a little bit of card advantage. We, at the start of our upkeep, exile the top card of our library, and keep doing that every turn. So we might amass a little collection of exiled cards that we can cast any of as long as we've cast something else first. So we get to have basically a little second hand that can only happen if it's at least our second spell. Seems good. Next, I mentioned a moment ago about pronunciations for Tolkien lovers. I'm not a Final Fantasy guy, so if you're a Final Fantasy guy, tell me that I'm getting this wrong or that I got it right in the comments. Or if you're a Final Fantasy gal or anyone else, just let me know if you like Final Fantasy and if you have some comments on my pronunciation for this person's name, because I believe this is Alice Levelure. If I am wrong, and I probably am, let me know. So for 2 and a white, we get a 3/2 legendary elf wizard with partner with Alphanod Leveler. Again, doing my best. Partner with, in this instance, means when Alice enters, we get to search our library for Alphanod and put them into our hand. We have to, of course, reveal them. But that means Alice draws us a card. It's always going to be Alphanod, as long as Alphanod isn't, already on the battlefield or in our hand or in our graveyard. We can just search, find it, put it in our hand, and shuffle. Pretty nice to be able to get a bonus friend. Alice also has First Strike and an ability called Dual Cast, which says the second spell we cast each turn costs 2 generic mana less to cast. That's particularly cool, because what if we then want to cast Alphanod since it's in our hand? Well, if Alice was our first spell that turn, then Alphanod, or any other spell we cast next, is going to cost 2 less that same turn. Pretty sweet for a 3/2 First Strike. Now, I know you're wondering, why did I jump down to Alice after Monk class? Great question. Let's talk about Tygum next. Tygum is 1 and a blue for a 2/2 legendary human monk with Flurry. Whenever we cast our second spell each turn, we copy it, and then we exile the spell we cast with 4 time counters on it. If it doesn't have Suspend, it gains Suspend. So what this means is, if we were to cast, let's say, Clarion Spirit, and it's the second spell we cast that turn with Tygum in play, we're going to make a copy of Clarion Spirit on the stack, and then exile Clarion Spirit with those 4 time counters on it, and it will gain Suspend. The copy will then resolve, and we'll get a token Clarion Spirit. And then, with Suspend, the way that it works is, at the beginning of our upkeep, we will take a time counter off of the original Clarion Spirit that's in exile, and when we take the last one off, we get to cast it for free, and it has haste. Pretty nice. So we get to essentially get a second spell just 4 turns later. So this is Tygum giving us additional value later on, and we don't miss out on the value of the spell we cast in that moment, since we get a copy of it. Aligned Heart is next from the Tarkir Dragonstorm Commander product. 2 and a white for an enchantment with Flurry as well. Whenever we cast our second spell, we put a rally counter on this enchantment. Rally counters don't have an inherent mechanical meaning, they just are used by this card. And then it says we create a 1/1 white monk creature token with prowess for each rally counter on it. That's crazy. So imagine playing Aligned Heart on one of your turns, and then you play something else that same turn. You'll trigger Flurry, put a counter on Aligned Heart, and make a single monk, because it now has 1 counter on it. Next turn, if you cast 2 spells, the second spell you cast is going to put a second counter on Aligned Heart, and you'll make 2 1/1 white monk creature tokens with prowess. Then the next turn, if you play your second spell again, you'll put another counter on this and make 3 of them. So you've got 6 total little monks that you've made. This can make an awful lot of monks over the course of the game, and because we have a lot of non-creature spells, we're only running 10 creatures in this deck, including our commander. Aligned Heart can make us a whole lot of monks and power them up each turn. So we've seen Alice. Let's now talk about Highspire Bellringer. 2 and a blue for a 1/4 flying Djinn monk that says the second spell you cast each turn costs 1 less to cast. Another one of these discounters for our second spells. Pretty good to have monk class, Alice, and Highspire Bellringer all working together for us. Next we have Lavinia Foil to Conspiracy from the Clue product. 1 and double Azorius Hybrid mana gets us a 2/3 legendary human detective with vigilance that says whenever you cast your second spell each turn, investigate. Investigate means you make a clue token, which is an artifact with the ability for us to pay 2 and sack it to draw a card. Lavinia also taps for 2 colorless mana, but we can only activate that during an opponent's turn. So the easiest way to look at this is Lavinia is a 3 mana 2/3 with vigilance, and every time we cast our second spell, we get to make a clue, and then we, on an opponent's turn, will tap Lavinia for the 2 mana and use that to crack the clue. We could use it for something else if we want, but this is a pretty great use of our creature, especially because she has vigilance. So we could attack with her if we wanted to, and still keep her untapped to be able to tap her for clue mana. So slow, since we're not drawing the card on our turn, but it's also not costing us any mana to crack that clue, since we're able to use Lavinia's mana to do so. So we're getting a free extra card basically during the end step of our opponent to the right. So we're starting our turn with an extra card in hand. Seems pretty good. Next up, we have Uthros Psionicist. Another one of these. It's our 4th creature that discounts our second spell each turn. This one, again, by 2. Otherwise, it's 2 and a blue for a 2/4 Jellyfish Scientist, from Edge of Eternities. So a lot of ways for us to discount that second spell, which is really nice because if our commander is the second spell, our commander just costs a blue, a red, and a white. We can ignore the other 2 and we can use our mana for other things. Next, we get to see Alphanod. Alphanod Leveler, again, maybe right, is 3 and a blue for a legendary elf wizard. Alphanod is a 2/4 with vigilance and partner with Alisei. So that means if we play Alphanod first, we can go look for Alisei, put them on our hand, and shuffle. And Alphanod has Eucrasia, whatever that means. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, draw a card. So pretty nice. If we get Alphanod first, we then cast Alisei, and we get to draw a card, if that was, of course, our second spell. And if we get Alisei first, we can then tutor for Alphanod, cast Alphanod for 2 less, thanks to Alisei. Both of these are helpful. Good job, friends. We've seen Ramasei Core and how it can give us a wall with Defender, and it gives all of our defenders exalted. And then last we have Shiko and Narset Unified. This is the face commander from the Jeskai Dragonstorm Commander deck. 1 and Jeskai mana for a legendary human spirit dragon. This is dragon typed, and that will be relevant later on. It's a 4/4 with flying and vigilance and flurry. Whenever we cast our second spell each turn, we copy that spell if it targets a permanent or player, and we may choose new targets for the copy. And if we don't copy a spell this way, we draw a card. So when we cast our second spell, as long as it targets a permanent or player, we're going to copy that spell. It doesn't say you may copy it. It just says you may choose new targets. So if we were to cast, Boros Charm, and it targets our commander to give them double strike until end of turn, we're going to be doubling. If that's our second spell, we're going to make a copy of Boros Charm. But if we're casting, with Shiko and Narset in play, and we've cast Alisei, now we're casting Alphanod, we'll get a second Alphanod. Or we would if it targeted. It does not target, so we're just going to draw a card instead. So Shiko Narset, essentially for us, is a 4-mana, 4/4 flying vigilant human spirit dragon that draws us a card every time we cast our second spell, so long as that second spell doesn't target something. And in our deck, they usually don't. So those are our second spell tagged cards. We're going to start talking about the cards that supplement our game plan, but first, I want us to go over these sections of support. We're going to start with card advantage. As usual, I've used the word draw here just to represent card advantage as a shorthand. That doesn't mean all of these cards actually perform the game action of drawing us a card, but they do put a card in our hand and give us, or otherwise give us access to something else we can cast. Starting with Arcane Denial. Arcane Denial is actually a removal spell. 1 and a blue for an instant that says counter target spell. Its controller may draw up to 2 cards at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. And we draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. So Arcane Denial is just counterspell for a better mana, 1 and a blue rather than double blue, and it replaces itself at the next turn's upkeep. It's just that whoever controlled the spell we countered is going to get to draw 2 cards at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep, if they choose to, and they probably will. It's fine. Bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. We don't mind getting rid of whatever spell that they're casting and giving them cards, especially because we get a card as well. Next is Mind Stone, more of a ramp piece. It is 2 generic mana for an artifact that taps for colorless mana, so it's a mana rock. But we can also pay 1, tap, and sack it to draw a card, maybe later in the game if we get to a late game, and we need a card in our hand more than we need the Mind Stone in hand, or in play rather, then better to just sack it and draw ourselves a card. Monk class, of course, can draw us a card, or rather give us card advantage in the form of its level 3 ability. Roiling Dragonstorm, really fun in this deck. 1 and a blue for an enchantment that says when it enters, we draw 2 and discard 1. Pretty good, a little card selection. Cards in hand. And when a dragon we control enters, return this enchantment to its owner's hand. So Roiling Dragonstorm in this deck looks like pay 2 mana, draw 2 cards, discard a card. Then play your commander and bounce Roiling Dragonstorm. At the end of your commander's Anticipate trigger, bounce your commander. So you get to repeat that whole process every turn, ending up with 2 new cards in hand and then 1 card in the graveyard, and just cycling through all the cards you want and getting the ones you need the most. Seems like a lot of fun. We've seen Taigam and how Taigam gives us a copy of a card, and even though it's slow, because we suspended a card, 4 turns later we'll get the original copy of it. Tome of Legends, originally, interestingly, from the Chu Lane deck in the Throne of Eldraine Brawl paper product. Really strange. But yeah, Tome of Legends is 2 generic mana for an artifact that enters with a page counter on it. Again, page counters don't have an inherent mechanical meaning, they're just used by the tome. It says whenever our commander enters or attacks, we put a page counter on this artifact. So every turn, we're going to be putting 2 more counters on this because our commander is going to enter and attack every turn. And then for 1 and tap and removing a page counter from this artifact, we get to draw a card. So we get to turn our commander's enters and attacks into card draw that we get to do every turn. It just costs 1 mana for us. Next, we've seen Alisei. Alisei gives us card advantage in the form of letting us tutor for Alphanod. Ardent Plea lets us cascade into something, so we will get to cast another spell, even though we do it right then as part of the cascade trigger. Candlekeep Sage draws us a card every time our commander enters or leaves. Pretty good. Next we have Dragon's Hoard, another mana rock that helps us. 3 generic mana for an artifact that says whenever a dragon we control enters, we put a gold counter on this artifact. Again, counter without an inherent mechanical meaning. We can tap the Hoard and remove a gold counter to draw a card. Or we can just tap it for 1 mana of any color. So it's a Manalith. A Manalith that gives us a new gold counter every turn when our commander, the Orc Dragon, enters the battlefield. So we can use it for mana, or we can use it for card advantage, and we don't even have to pay mana into it to do that. Next is Frostcliff Siege. 1 blue and a red for an enchantment that says, as it enters, we choose Jeskai or Temur. I know you're thinking, probably Jeskai in this deck, but we can go either way actually. If we choose Jeskai, it says whenever 1 or more creatures we control deal combat damage to a player, we draw a card. So an extra card every time our commander hits, and we can stack it so that we anticipate first, and we know we're not going to be drawing one of those cards if we want to. Or we can choose Temur, and creatures we control get +1/+0 and have trample and haste. Our commander already has haste, but trample on top of flying would be pretty great, and making them a 5/4 rather than a 4/4 is also pretty good. So you'd want to choose Jeskai or Temur based on what your board looks like once this comes out, and you're probably not going to have a bad time either one you choose. Next, we've already seen Lavinia. Lavinia, of course, makes us clue tokens every time we cast our second spell, and can crack them for us with the mana that she provides. Alphanod, when we cast our second spell, we get to draw a card. Ramus Akor, when we cast our second spell, we get tokens with Defender, which is pretty good, but it doesn't give us card advantage, except for the fact that it also draws us a card. It's snuck right in there in the middle of that trigger. Every time we cast our second spell, we're drawing a card. Same thing as Alphanod does for us. And same thing that Shiko and Narset do for us if the spell we cast, our second spell, doesn't target a permanent or player. If it does, we just make a copy of that, which is also card advantage. So that covers our card advantage section. Let's take a look at our acceleration, which, again, I've just shorthanded as a tag of ramp. Obviously, we've got to run Sol Ring. it taps for 1, or sorry, it costs 1, it taps for 2. This is an artifact we want in our deck. It's the symbol of the format. Wayfarer's Bauble also costs 1, and we can pay 2 and tap it and sacrifice it to search our library for a basic land, put that onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. This is Rampant Growth. Rampant Growth in our Jeskai deck, it's going to fix our mana, it's going to make sure we have the pips that we need for being able to cast the spells that we want. It's great. Arcane Signet, also excellent. 2 generic mana for an artifact that lets us tap for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. So this is a 2 mana rock, comes in untapped, and taps for white, blue, or red. Pretty good. Felwar Stone. I like to run Felwar Stone in my commander decks that have at least 3 colors. It's still fine in commander decks that are fewer colors than that. But for 2 generic mana, we get an artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color a land an opponent controls could produce. That means if our opponents are running anything other than just green and black, we're going to make at least one of the colors that we need to make. And if an opponent has a land that somehow could make any color, then Felwar Stone can also make any color. We've seen Guild Artisan and how whenever we attack a player, as long as that player is, whenever our commander attacks a player, as long as that player has the most life or is tied for the most life among our opponents, we make 2 treasures. Mind Stone, of course, is a 2 mana rock, taps for colorless. Monk class makes our second spell we cast each turn cost 1 less. Talisman of Conviction is another 2 mana rock. Cost 2, taps for colorless, or we can tap it for red or white if we're willing to let it do 1 damage to us. The way this normally plays out is that oftentimes we're just tapping it for colorless, and if we really need the colored mana, it's worth the damage to us. So we might as well just take the damage. Even if this does a few damage to us over the course of the game, it means that we needed that colored mana, and so we were able to cast our spells, so totally worth it. The same is true of the other 2 talismans. Talismans of Creativity and of Progress. Conviction gives us white and red, Creativity gives us blue and red, and Talisman of Progress gives us white and blue. All of them worthy. And we have Thought Vessel as well. Another 2 mana rock, taps for colorless, and it gives us no maximum hand size. Very useful to us for all of the cards we're putting in our hand, especially with our commander's Anticipate trigger, and with our commander themselves going back to our hand. We don't want to have to discard our cards if we don't want to, so there we go. Alisei, as we've seen, makes our second spell each turn cost 2 less. Chromatic Lantern, something else I like to run in my 3 mana commander decks. This is another Manalith, 3 mana artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color, but it also says our lands tap for 1 mana of any color. So this fixes our mana perfectly. It makes it so, with the exception of 2 of the lands in our land base, these are producing, all of our lands are going to be able to produce whatever color of mana that we want, and it's probably better than what they were already doing, so pretty good. We'll talk about those exceptions when we get to the land base at the end of the video. We're running Dragonstorm Globe. This is really fun. It's a common from Dragonstorm. 3 generic mana for an artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color, so another Manalith, but it also says each dragon we control enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So our commander is going to come in every turn as a 5/5 at the bare minimum with Dragonstorm Globe in play. We don't even have to use its mana to make that happen. Pretty good. Highspire Bellringer, of course, makes our second spell cost 1 less. And Uthros Psionicist makes our second spell cost 2 less. So we've got several different discounts going on here. I believe, in fact, am I missing one? I don't think I am. Just feels like we have so many that it's worth checking. All right, good. Finally, we have Kozilek's Unsealing. Kozilek's Unsealing is 2 and a blue for an enchantment with Devoid. Not really relevant in our deck, but who knows? Maybe one of our opponents will be running Pyroblast and they want to counter our blue spell. Kozilek's Unsealing, even though we're casting it with blue mana, has no color. It says, whenever we cast a creature spell with mana value 4, 5, or 6, we make 2 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature tokens with sacrifice this token and add a colorless mana. So this, in a way, is our ramp. Every time we cast our commander, which is mana value 5, we're going to make 2 of these Eldrazi spawn. They are tokens that can block if we want them to, because they're 0/1s, or we can crack them whenever we feel like, because they do not tap to produce this mana, so we can sacrifice them immediately if we feel like it, that same turn, and make extra mana for ourselves. And we have this other ability, which is whenever we cast a creature spell with mana value 7 or greater, we draw 3 cards. Not relevant in our deck. We have no creatures of that mana value. We have no spells of that mana value. It is worth recognizing that this is about mana value, not about mana cost. Mana value is the total amount of mana printed on the card. So if somehow our commander dies twice and we have to recast them from the command zone or I should say dies once and we have to recast them from the command zone for 7 mana, that does not make them mana value 7, that makes them mana value 5, mana cost 7, because the commander tax is an additional cost, doesn't change the value of the mana. So this is not helping us in this deck, but this is so good, still worth running for our 3 mana enchantment. That covers our acceleration section. Let's talk now about our interaction section, which again, just shorthanded as removal. So Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares are the same card with one difference. They are both a 1 mana instant, they both exile a target creature, and they both give that creature's controller a kickback. Swords to Plowshares gives that creature's controller life equal to the creature's power, and Path to Exile lets that creature's controller rampant growth. Search for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. Obviously, Swords to Plowshares is better, but both are very good, and both are excellent instant speed interaction in white. We have some instant speed interaction in red in Abrade. 1 in a red for an instant that lets us either do 3 damage to a creature or destroy an artifact. If we need to get rid of artifacts, Abrade is our friend. And 3 damage can sometimes be the difference between killing a creature and maybe our opponent having a blocker or not. We've seen Arcane Denial and how it can counter a spell, and Boros Charm and how it can do 4 damage to a player or Planeswalker. Gets rid of a Planeswalker. Next we have Invasion of Tarkir. This is the only battle we're running, because remember, our commander will trigger when it does combat damage to a player or a battle. Invasion of Tarkir. Oh, let's talk about what battles are. This is a siege battle, which means when it enters, we get to choose an opponent who is protecting it. We can attack it, and can the other players other than that defending player. And if once we have attacked it, every damage done to it reduces one of these defense counters that it comes in with, which is to say there's 5 of them. Once it is defeated, which is to say reduced to 0 or below, we exile it and we can cast it transformed, which means we can cast its backside without paying any sort of mana for it. What we like to do is we choose an opponent and say, look, I have a battle here. Are you likely to defend it? Are you willing to be its protector? And do you want to block if I attack it? And they might say yes. Maybe everyone says yes. They probably ought to. But if they don't, if they say, no, I don't care, you can say, all right, cool, I'll leave you alone for a turn cycle. I just want to be able to hit this with my commander and flip it. That's not really usually to their advantage, but some people will go for that. They don't want to have to deal with it. So battles are really fun in this way. In addition, Invasion of Tarkir costs 1 in a red, and when it enters, we reveal any number of dragon cards from our hand, and when we do, the siege does X plus 2 damage to any other target, where X is the number of cards revealed this way. So normally, in a deck full of dragons, which this deck is not, we would be doing a bunch of damage. In this, we only have 2 real dragons in the deck, our commander and Shiko and Narset. So if we have Shiko and Narset in hand, we can likely do 3 damage, Shiko and Narset plus the 2. But remember, our commander is in our hand most turns until we've cast it, and then it'll go back to our hand at the end. So as long as we cast Invasion of Tarkir before we've cast our commander from our hand, we're going to be able to lightning bolt something. X of 1 plus 2, so 3 damage to any other target. Pretty good. We can't hit the invasion itself, but that's fine. And then, when we flip it, it flips into a Defiant Thundermaw, which is a 4/4 flying, trampling dragon that says whenever a dragon we control attacks, it deals 2 damage to any target. It being the attacking dragon. So if we attack with a Thundermaw, it will do 2 damage to something. We get a free shock. If our commander attacks, our commander will do a free 2 damage to anything. That doesn't count as commander damage, but it's nice to get a bonus little bit of damage in the form of that shock trigger. So yeah, and Defiant Thundermaw itself is a dragon, so if we have our commander in play and the Thundermaw attacks opponent A, and our commander attacks opponent B, both of those are going to trigger because it's two different opponents being hit with a dragon we control. And if we have something like Dragonstorm Globe in play, when we cast the backside of our Invasion of Tarkir, then it will enter as Defiant Thundermaw with a counter because it was a dragon entering under our control. Pretty nice. We've seen Monk class and how its level 2 can bounce an on-land permanent. We're running Banishing Light because it's just a useful universal removal spell for us. 2 and a white for an enchantment that says when it enters, we exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until Banishing Light leaves the battlefield. So we can deal with anything other than a land, and we're not trying to do much land removal in general. And it gives us an extra enchantment in play for our enchantments and artifact count that some of our other spells care about. So yeah, just lock something down. Especially nice as well is the fact that Banishing Light O-rings something. It sits on the battlefield with our opponent looking at it and saying, I can get my card back as long as I just kill that Banishing Light. Which means it's removal bait. If they have a Disenchant or a Naturalize or something else like that, we have so many better enchantments and artifacts than Banishing Light in our deck for us winning the game. Banishing Light just stops one of our opponents from getting closer to winning the game. So if they want to get that back, they're going to have to use their Disenchant on Banishing Light rather than our Candlekeep Sage or our Dock Ox Tentacles or whatever it is we're going to use to pump up our commander or get card advantage and otherwise just win with our commander damage. Next is Emergency Eject. For those of you who like to run Generous Gift, cards like that, I think Emergency Eject is the best version of this. Because Generous Gift does have the ability to hit lands, but I'm not trying to remove lands for the most part. So if you're looking at 2 and a white to remove a non-land permanent, I think Stroke of Midnight is very good from Wilds of Eldraine. It gives the controller of that permanent a 1/1 human token, but Emergency Eject is better because at instant speed we can destroy and target non-land permanent and give its controller a lander token, which is a Wayfarer's Bauble. It's an artifact that they have to pay to, tap, and sacrifice to let them rampant growth. So this is a token, it can't block, it lets them ramp a little bit, but they do have to pay for it themselves, and it's a rampant growth ramp, so they don't even get that land in untapped. I think Emergency Eject is underplayed. And then finally, Sarkhan's Unsealing is 3 and a red, so another 4 mana card, don't see a lot of these, for an enchantment that says when you cast a creature spell with power 4, 5, or 6, this enchantment deals 4 damage to any target. So a good way to just kill things for 4 damage, especially because our commander costs 5, or has a power of 4, rather. So as opposed to Kozilek's Unsealing, which cares about mana value, this cares about power. It also says when you cast a creature spell with power 7 or greater, this enchantment deals 4 damage to each opponent and each creature and planeswalker they control. That's not likely to happen. Our commander, as a spell, is always going to have power 4, so we don't need to worry about this. But we have this in the deck for a similar reason to Kozilek's Unsealing. It's just instead of giving us ramp when we cast our commander every turn, it's going to let us do damage to something every turn. Maybe a planeswalker, maybe our opponents, maybe one of their creatures, or even we might be doing 4 damage just to Invasion of Tarkir, bringing it down to a single defense counter left, then attacking it with our commander, getting the Anticipate trigger, getting to flip it over into this Defiant Thundermaw. Either way, pretty nice with Sarkhan's Unsealing. We are running 1 Wrath. I know we're in white and we're in red, so we have good abilities to play any number of Wrath of Gods or Day of Judgments or anything like that. And that's not a bad option for this deck. But I wanted to go with River's Rebuke. It seemed more fun. 4 and double blue gives us a sorcery that returns all non-land permanents target player controls to their owner's hand. This is expensive for us, but it's on theme. Because what we're doing is returning our commander to our hand every turn. We want to therefore take whichever player we're trying to knock out of the game and bounce all of their stuff. This gets around Indestructible, it gets around Hexproof, anything that they have that isn't themselves having Hexproof. We're going to be able to just put all their things back in their hand and hopefully swing in for lethal commander damage on them to knock them out of the game. That's why we have River's Rebuke. So that covers our support sections. We're going to look at the cards that are supplementing our game plan and go over why they're good in our deck. So we've seen Civic Saber. It's one of our Voltron cards. It gives +3/+0 to our commander. Doc Ock's Tentacles, similar, snaps on, so we don't have to pay to equip it. Gives +4/+4 to our commander. Dragonfire Blade can give our commander +2/+2 and Hexproof for multicolored, just for 1 mana. Sigh of the Shinobi only gives +1/+1, but we don't have to pay to equip it because it snaps on whenever a creature enters. Brimstone Roundup creates Mercenaries, which can give +1/+0 at sorcery speed by us tapping them. Favorable Winds, very simple card. 1 and a blue, it's an enchantment, gives our flying creatures +1/+1. Pretty good, just a nice 2 mana. This is going to give our commander a constant bonus every time our commander comes in. I like it. Hero's Blade, as we've seen, it equips for 4, but it snaps onto our legendary creatures when they come in if we want, to give +3/+2. Noble Heritage at the start of our upkeep, but more importantly, when our commander enters, we can put 2 counters on it. That'll pump it up, not to mention giving our opponents the ability to put 2 counters on one of their creatures, and therefore us gaining protection from that opponent until our next turn. Storm Rider Rig snaps on as well, just like Sigh of the Shinobi, gives +1/+1. Ardent Plea, when our commander attacks alone, since the plea has exalted, we get +1/+1 on them. Dragonstorm Globe, when the commander enters, because it's a dragon, it gets +1/+1. We're also running Ferocity of the Wilds. I love this card from Throne of Eldraine. 2 and a red for an enchantment that says attacking non-human creatures you control get +1/+1 and have trample, which means this won't help Shiko and Narset, because Narset, of course, is a human, but this does help Zurgo and Ojutai, because Zurgo is an orc. So Ferocity of the Wilds will give our commander not just +1/+0 when it attacks, but also trample. So if we have to trample over an opponent's blocker, we've got it. And if we've got double strike in the process, that means we're doing an awful lot more damage, not just with that +1/+0, but we're trampling over once we've done lethal damage to any blockers. I think this is pretty nice. We've seen Frostcliff Siege, and of course how it can give +1/+0 and trample and haste to all of our creatures. Grafted Wargear gives +3/+2 and equips for nothing, and has no downside with our commander, the way we're playing it. Nettle Cyst gives +1/+1 for every artifact and enchantment we control, and Ramasei Core makes these walls that each have exalted, or gain exalted at the beginning of combat on our turn. So that's our pump section. Let's take a look at our evasion section. We already know our commander can fly, and that's pretty good, but Brotherhood Regalia can make them unblockable. So can Sword Coast Sailor when they attack an opponent that has the most life or is tied for the most life. Ferocity of the Wilds can give trample, and Frostcleave Siege can as well. That's our evasion. We have a protection section. We are looking at Dragonfire Blade and how it can give hexproof from monocolored, not just to our commander, but to any other creature we put it on. Boros Charm can protect our commander or our other permanents by giving them indestructible. Brotherhood Regalia, of course, gives Ward 2 to the equipped creature. Noble Heritage protects us from whichever opponent decides to put the 2/1/1 counters on one of their creatures, at least until our next turn. Popular Entertainer lets us goad creatures that are controlled by the player we do damage to with our commander. So goad means we're likely not going to have to deal with that creature, at least before our next turn. And finally, Ghostly Prison and Propaganda, other than their color, are the same card. They are 2 and a color, blue for Propaganda and white for Ghostly Prison, for an enchantment that says creatures can't attack us unless their controller pays 2 generic mana for each creature they control that's attacking us. So that just means in order to declare a creature as an attacker against us, its controller has to pay 2 generic mana for that creature. And then for each creature, they do. So if they want to attack us with 3 creatures, it's going to cost them 6 generic mana. And if we have Ghostly Prison and Propaganda out, or maybe we have a copy of one of these, thanks to something like Tygum, it's going to be 4 mana for each creature. So this can really protect us when our turns are spent casting our commander and having our commander not sit around and be able to block. So we want to go quick with this deck, but it's about dashing, so that makes sense. That covers our protection section. We're going to look now at our tokens. We've seen all these. Brimstone Roundup on our second spell makes us a mercenary. Clarion Spirit on our second spell makes us a flying spirit. Aligned Heart on our second spell puts a counter on itself, and based on the number of counters on it, we make that many 1/1 monks with prowess. Kozilek's Unsealing, when we cast a creature spell, mana value 4, 5, or 6, we get 2 Eldrazi spawn. And Ramus Acor, when we cast our second spell, we get that 0/3 wall with Defender that can also have Exalted. Those are our tokens. We're going to look at our Dragons section, just to point out that we have a Dragons section. It has Shiko and Narset in it, which is typed Dragon. Evasion of Tarkir cares about our dragons and is a dragon on the back. This is not a relevant section for this version of the deck that much, except, like I mentioned at the start of talking about the deck, we have a considering section at the bottom of the deck, at the bottom of the page rather. A lot of dragons in that section. So if you want to lean more heavily into, I'm playing a lot more dragons with my Zurgo and Ojutai deck, there are some cool dragons in that section that you can get started with and get ideas from there. Along those same lines, we have a Typal section. These are cards that care about dragons, that aren't necessarily dragons themselves, like the front side of Invasion of Tarkir cares about how many dragons we have in hand. Roiling Dragonstorm cares about when we have dragons enter. Dragon's Horde, when dragons enter, we get to put gold counters on it. When dragons enter, when we have Dragonstorm Globe in play, they enter with 1/1 counters. Again, more Typal cards in our considering section, but these are the ones that I thought fit best for this version of the deck. So that covers all of our spells. As usual, we're going to look at our land base. So we are a little lighter on on red than we are on white and blue. Slightly higher on blue. But just to make things work well, we've got plenty of mana and plenty of our colors when it comes to the pips we're running. But we're running 15 basics, 6, 4, 5 for islands, mountain, plains as our sort of balance. We're running all 3 bounce lands in these colors. If you haven't seen them before, a bounce land taps for 2 mana. But they all enter tapped, and they all require us to bounce a land to our hand once the bounce land enters. So we're doing a lot more bouncing. This is nice because it means maybe we have 2 lands in play, 2 basics, let's say, and we play the Azorius Chancery. We can tap those basics for mana before we bounce one of them. Now the Chancery comes in tapped, but we still get to use the mana from the land that we bounced. And this ensures we're going to hit our land drop next turn because we just put a land back in our hand, so we can just replay it. The only difference between these 3 lands, just like we saw with the Talismans, is the color combinations. The Chancery is for white and blue, the Garrison's for red and white, and the Boilerworks is for blue and red. We are running 6 fixing lands in this deck. We start with our Command Tower, of course. Command Tower is a land that comes in untapped and taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. It's Arcane Signet on a land, if you want to think of it that way. An untapped tri-land. Yeah, we're going to run that. Next we have Exotic Orchard. This is Fellwar Stone on a land. It's an untapped land that taps for 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. So this might be all 3 of our colors. It might be 2 of our colors, which means it's an untapped dual. It might be only 1 of our colors. That's okay, but it might get better as our opponents play other lands later. And like I've said before, if one of our opponents or any of our opponents has a land that can tap for any color, then Exotic Orchard can tap for any color. Next is Path of Ancestry. It comes in tapped, but it has the same text as Command Tower. So it can tap for 3 colors, so it's a tapped tri-land. That's worth running. In addition, if we use the mana from Path of Ancestry to cast a creature spell that shares a type with our commander, we scry 1. As you can expect, our commander shares a type with itself. It shares both types with itself, in fact. So we can cast Shiko and Narset with this and, get a scry because they are both dragons, our commander and Shiko and Narset. But more importantly, if Path of Ancestry is in play, we want to use it every turn we cast our commander, so we get a free scry before we attack with our commander and hopefully get an Anticipate trigger. So if we see something on the top of our library that we don't want, or we don't think we can cast that turn, even with whatever's below it, we can just scry it to the bottom. Or if we see something we love, and we definitely want to make sure we get into our hand, assuming nothing else better in it in the top 3, then we keep it on top. That extra scry every turn really helps our commander's Anticipate trigger. We are running Temple of the False God, of course. I know some people don't like this land, but I think it's very strong. For 2 generic mana, it's an untapped land that makes 2 colorless mana, but only if we control 4 other lands, because it needs 5, but it counts itself. So this is a soul land, like a soul ring, but we can't use it earlier in the game. So a little bit of a bummer if it's in our hand and we only have like 1 other land in hand. That's probably not a keepable opener. But if we have this in our opening hand and we've got 3 or 4 other lands in that hand, we're likely to be able to get this out, especially with the land count in this deck, and have it be ramp on a land, because it's 1 land drop to make 2 mana. Pretty good. We're running Perilous Landscape. Perilous Landscape is an untapped land that taps for colorless, but we can also tap it, sack it, and search for any of our colors, or any of the basics that we have in our deck, an island, a mountains, or a plains. So it is our Evolving Wilds for this deck, because it just comes in and we can tap it and sack it right away to find a basic, or we can play it and tap it for colorless if we need the colorless mana. Or if it's late in the game and we've got the colored mana to spare, we can also cycle this for a blue, a red, and a white. Meaning while it's in our hand, we pay blue, red, white, and discard it, and we can draw a card. This is a little expensive and slow for this deck, but it's a nice option to have if we don't need it for just colorless mana or to Evolving Wilds our way into some colored mana. Finally, Myriad Landscape in this section is quite slow, but ramp. It enters tapped, taps for colorless, or we can pay 2 tap and sack it to search our library for up to 2 basic land cards that share a land type. So in this deck, either 2 basic mountains, 2 basic plains, or 2 basic islands. Then we put those both on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. So it's a double rampant growth of the lands for the same type. So even though this comes in tapped, we have to pay and sack it, and the basics come in tapped, it is us getting 2 lands in play for 1 land drop. And it's a great thing for us to do on turn 3 if we were able to get Myriad Landscape into play on turn 1 and 2 to end up with a little bit more mana than we would have otherwise had by turn 4. So we might be able to cast our commander by turn 4 with Myriad Landscape. Pretty good. We are running all 3 Pain lands because these are untapped duels. These are just like the talismans we saw earlier, except they're lands. They come in untapped, they tap for colorless, or we can take a damage to get 1 of 2 colored options of mana. So the Adakar Wastes makes Azorius mana, the Battlefield Forge makes Boros mana, and Shivan Reef makes Izzet mana. So pretty good options for us, and the same thing I said before applies. We're usually going to use these for colorless mana, but if we need the colored mana, we don't have to wait for it. These come in untapped, and it's worth the 1 point of damage. We're running all 3 pathways as well, because I love pathways, and this is just a good deck for it. So Hingegate Pathway, for example, is an untapped land that taps for white, but we can play it on its backside, and it's Mistgate Pathway. It's an untapped land that taps for blue. The same is true for Needle Verge and Pillar Verge Pathway and River Glide and Lava Glide Pathway. All of them are just a combination of 2 colors, and we just play it on one side or the other, and it's an untapped land of that color. What's particularly nice, and I say this in all my videos, but we're running bounce lands in this deck. We've got 3 of them and 3 pathways, so this play pattern may be more likely to come up than most decks. If we have River Glide Pathway in our hand, for example, and we need red, we can play it as Lava Glide Pathway. Comes in and taps for red. Pretty good. Then we play a bounce land, let's say Izzet Boilerworks. We bounce the Lava Glide Pathway, and now it's in our hand, and we can replay it as River Glide Pathway if we need to. So being able to have that option between pathways and bounce lands is pretty sweet. We're also running 3 Scry lands. The 3 temples are all the same as one another. They all come in tapped. They all scry us 1 when they come in, and they tap for 1 of 2 colors. Enlightenment is Azorius mana, Epiphany is Izzet mana, Triumph is Boros mana. These are comparable to the Path of Ancestry that we're running, except that they only scry for us once, rather than every turn we use the mana on our commander. But they are a guaranteed scry. We don't have to actually, have our commander coming in that turn in order to, or spend the mana on it, really, in order to get that scry. So a nice way to give a little bit more card selection when we're going to be tapping our commander and attacking and looking at the top 3 cards of our library anyway. We are running Mystic Monastery. It's one of the Tarkir themed tri-lands, comes in tapped, and taps for 1 mana of any of our 3 colors. And of course, we're running the Dragonstorm printing of it. So a little slow, but totally fine. I can mention this now. Mystic Monastery, if you wanted to upgrade this, you could sure upgrade to Rogren Triome, which is the Triome version of this. Identical land, but it also cycles for 3 generic mana. Similarly, for the Pain lands, if you wanted to upgrade these, you could upgrade to one of the Shock lands. Hallowed Fountain, Sacred Foundry, and Steam Vents, which also can do damage to you, but it's only 2 damage for it to come in untapped, and then you don't have to worry, or by paying 2 life rather, and then you don't have to worry about doing consistent damage to you. Yeah, and there's other upgrades that can be made, but I think these are all pretty good and relatively nice for your budget. Finally, we have a few utility lands. I'm running the Stellar Sights printing of Cathedral of War from Edge of Eternities because it's the most inexpensive version of this card, and it's pretty sweet. This is a tap land that taps for colorless, but it has Exalted on it, which means in our land base, we've got a land that does make mana, even though it comes in tapped. And even while tapped, when we attack with our commander by themselves, they're going to get +1/+1. So this is our 3rd instance of Exalted in this deck. A great way to keep our Voltron commander swinging in and getting closer and closer to winning with commander damage. I mentioned a couple of times before about removal of lands. I don't do any mass land denial in my decks typically, but I do like to run Demolition Field because sometimes you have to deal with a Glacial Chasm or a Rogue's Passage if someone else is running a Voltron deck. Some kind of problematic non-basic land your opponent's running. So Demolition Field comes in untapped, taps for colorless, but we can also pay 2, tap, and sack it to destroy a non-basic land our opponent controls, and then they get to search for a basic and put it on the battlefield untapped. And so do we. So neither of us are down a land. We both have a basic in play, and it comes in untapped, assuming we had basics left in our deck. And whatever problematic non-basic was in play isn't anymore. So Demolition Field, really nice utility for us in that way. We are running Reliquary Tower because we don't want to have to discard our cards if we don't need to. It taps for colorless and gives us no maximum hand size, especially when we have a hand that has 5 cards in it, or rather 6 cards in it, let's say. We do damage with our commander, we anticipate, we put a 7th card in our hand, and then we bounce our commander. Now we've got 8 cards. Don't want to have to discard if we don't have to. So Reliquary Tower helps us with that. And finally, we are a Voltron deck, so we're running Rogue's Passage. It taps for colorless, comes in untapped, but we can also pay for and tap it to make a creature unblockable until end of turn. That's usually going to be our commander, but that's also us assuming we have 10 mana sources, because it's 5 to play our commander, generally, and then we're paying 4 and tapping Rogue's Passage, which is itself a mana source, to have this effect. So it's a lot of mana to make this work, but when it works, it's going to be worth it. It's also worth remembering, this says target creature, not target creature you control. So you can use Rogue's Passage politically as well. You can say to an opponent, look, if you attack opponent B, before they get a chance to block, I will use my Rogue's Passage to make your creature unblockable. And if they say, no, use the Rogue's Passage first, you say, no, because then you could attack me unblockably. Don't want you to do that. But I will make the deal to do this as long as you're willing to attack that player. Usually you can find someone who wants to attack unblocked anyway, so oftentimes they'll agree to that, which means they then don't have a blocker that they would have otherwise had. Maybe that blocker wasn't relevant to us because it couldn't fly and didn't have reach, but then maybe that's the deal we make. Hey, I see you've got a Wind Drake, you attack someone else with that and I'll make sure it's unblockable. Or, they say no thanks, and we say, okay, then I'll just keep my Rogue's Passage untapped, and I can use it on my turn. And they might be like, oh, well, I think I might rather get the damage in. So yeah, and even still, we can say, I'll give you the ability to do a little bit of damage, or a lot of damage, depending on your creature, to a different opponent, and you just don't bother me for the next turn. That's a pretty good deal. And that about sums it up. Again, I'm making a deck for each of the March of the Machine commander options, all the different legends in March of the Machine. So if you'd like to see a specific commander or deck style, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, everyone. Make sure to like and subscribe, and remember, Magic is fun. You should play more Magic.